Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm going to be talking about insect books, and this is both a combination of fiction and non-fiction. So at time of posting, Springathon is upon us. We should be basically in the middle of the readathon right now, and what is more perfect than for the Springathon prompts than books about insects? And I did put out a general recommendations video and a books about plants video, and a lot of people commented on that one when I was like, what other areas of nature would you want? Insects definitely came up as sort of quite a high contender. So like I said, I've got a mixture of fiction and non-fiction today, but insects do play some kind of like major pivotal role in some way within these books. The first one is one of my favourite non-fiction books ever, and that is The Bees by Laline Paull. This is such a weird, cool fiction book. It is told from the point of view of a bee, and we basically just get to live through their life. As they have the various different roles within the hive. Now, apparently this is supposed to be a commentary on like women in society, but if you ignore all of that and just focus on the fact that it's very biologically accurate and scientifically accurate about how bees work, it's an incredibly cool book. You get to hang out inside this bee's head. It's all sorts of talks about like how their senses work. At one point a wasp tries to invade the nest and they talk about like the defense mechanisms that bees have for that. She goes out on like flying journeys and it's all about, again, her trying to find pollen and things. And I'm just incredibly invested in this tiny little bee. It is one of these very much like Marmite books. If you look on Goodreads, the 1 and the 5-star reviews are almost identical. It's either people going, it's just a book told from the point of view of a bee, the fuck, or, like me, it's just a book told from the point of view of a bee. This is so freaking cool. So if you're a fan of weird narrative viewpoints, sort of weird narration, and just like hanging out in the head of something entirely different to people, you'll definitely enjoy this one. Obviously, it's not got an insane amount of character work happening because it's a bee, but I had a really great time, and it is one that I think deserves more hype than it actually gets. Now, this has been mentioned a couple of times already for my Springathon stuff, but Rainbow Dust by Marren is absolutely perfect if you like butterflies in particular. So this is a look at both butterflies within Britain, but also butterfly collecting and the way that it really captured sort of the nation's imagination when Marren was a child. And it also looks at sort of history of science and how butterfly collecting has been connected often with women in science, and the ways that women were historically allowed within certain spheres of science when it came to things like collecting, but not necessarily doing experiments or catching them themselves, but instead being able to buy them from suppliers, and sort of the way that we gender coded what was or wasn't appropriate within the realms of science, specifically connected to butterflies. Like I say, there is some science about butterflies and sort of nature conservation kind of conversations as well, so you're getting a lovely kind of blend of history, of like a social history as well as kind of a nature writing thing going on here. Really good fun, great book. Also fantastic cover. The next one is definitely iconic for a reason, and that is Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis, and other stories. You can ignore the other stories in this one. So this is the short story about a gentleman who is turned into a beetle. It's a commentary on like the futility of human existence, etc. So if you want to go all like deep and, oh, the sun's shining through and I've gone, there we go, sorry. It's a very sunny day and that's going to keep happening, apologies. But yeah, so if you want to do the like deeper meaning read and go on a deep dive, there's been like countless things written about this book. It is a landmark piece of fiction. It is kind of the thing that coined the term like Kafka-esque writing, very much like a genre defining moment. But it's also just kind of a very cool short story about a gentleman turning into a beetle. So definitely check it out. It was one that I immediately thought of when I thought about insect, and I really like Kafka's writing style. I'm not personally a fan of the short story format, so I do prefer some of his other work that's longer, but this one is definitely worth the read, and if you like short stories you'll be pleased with this particular edition. This is the Alma Press Print Classics edition, but obviously it's been done in like 50 billion different books, so just find a copy that you like. The next book is Extraordinary Insects by Sverdrup-Thygeson. This is a fantastic non-fiction book that really I think is just your go-to starting place if you're interested in insects and want to know more about them. It covers what actually is an insect, the different classifications, and then kind of takes you through like a whistle-stop tour of some of the major insect groups that there are on our planet, for example beetles or wasps or flies or flying things or anything like that. It's incredibly detailed, incredibly interesting, and I read it for the first Springathon now 4 years ago, and I still think about lots of it to this day, and it really lays down the foundations. If you have no real idea of like what an insect actually is, this is a great place to start. It's very approachable science as well, and really worth a read. She has another one out called Tapestries of Life, which I definitely need to get to at some point. Now we're going to do some books that are a little bit more of a reach, if we're entirely honest. The next book I wanted to talk about is An Immense World by Ed Yong. Now this is actually about animal senses in general, but I kind of figure if you're into insects, you're going to be into animals in general as well, and insects do feature incredibly heavily in this book. It is a very dense book that is looking at the different ways that animal senses interact with the world and what's called their Umwelt, which is basically like their sensory perception of the world and how it dramatically differs from ours in many different ways. Like I say, insects feature really heavily. They pop up frequently in this book about being able to tell senses in different ways. It talks a lot about ants, is definitely sort of jumping to my mind. So really interesting about how they have like a sense of smell, or like their ability to touch, and sort of what are their basic waves, the different way that like bees can see light, and how and like UV light and things like that. So flowers will often look incredibly different to insects compared to us and have a lot more detail, or different detail compared to what we can see. So it's a very dense, incredibly intense book. I don't think it's the most accessible one on the market in terms of like, if you are brand new to science writing, this might be a bit of a chunky boy and you might get a bit bogged down in details around the middle. But if you're a like common viewer, firm reader of science books, this is sort of your wheelhouse, which it probably is if you're watching a video like this, then you'll be absolutely fine with this, because Ed Yong does do a really good job of explaining everything. Like I say, it's just jam-packed full of information that does start to kind of stack up on itself. So you need to be used to these kinds of books that are like, right, I'm going to throw 12 facts at you in one paragraph, keep up. Fantastic. I need to do a full review of this one. I read this in April, so it hasn't kind of had a feature on this channel yet, but yeah, a full review definitely coming sometime soon. And then I wanted to mention the children's series Animorphs by A Applegate. And I know what you're thinking, like, Emma, a kid's book? Seriously, come on, that's not why we're here. But these books are freaking fantastic. They were written in the 90s, and I'm very slowly making my way through the whole series. I haven't read any of them in a while, but they are wonderful. There's about 60 books in the series, and there are about 5 kids who find out that our planet is actually a like staging ground for a dramatic intergalactic war. Now, at what point do we start talking about insects? Basically, the kids get given the ability to absorb the DNA of any animal and then turn into that animal. But when they do that, they still have the kind of brain, the senses, the natural instincts of that animal pushing and fighting against a human brain when they're in it. And I think A Applegate does a really good job of conveying what all these different minds would be like to inhabit, and she has some really fantastic books that are focused primarily on insects. There is a great one quite early on where they turn into a spider, which is incredibly cool, and there's also some great ones where they turn into ants and turn into bees and have to fight with that hive mind mentality. So it's definitely something which you can dip in and out of them, but they're also actually surprisingly good reads. Like, eventually when I finish all of them, I will do a big review on this channel, but they really focus in on the like body horror aspect and the like actual horrors of war. So meaning that for kids books, they're surprisingly harrowing and surprisingly deep, and generally a really good read. There is sort of a bit in the middle where some ghostwriters came on board and things start to like lag a little bit, but if you're just jumping around for the sake of it, then you're not really going to notice that as much, and they are really fun, so definitely worth checking out. And then the final book I have to talk about is a classic, and that is The Beetle by Richard Marsh. This came out around the same time as Dracula and is a very similar kind of plot line. It is about some kind of weird mythical creature from another planet, sorry, not another planet, still talking about Animorphs, aren't I? Another country that comes to the UK in search of a particular woman. But in this one, the creature is sort of a weird mummy Egyptian like scarab beetle-esque type thing, and this book really plays into the idea of like the nefarious sort of sounds of the flying insect, like the wings going, and like this incredibly large beetle that then turns into more of a humanoid shape, and really taps into our fear of like those kind of flying things that can come at you and sort of at your face. Because let's face it, a lot of people are very actually scared of insects of a whole variety, and insects don't have to get that big before you start to become a bit apprehensive of them. So this is really tapping into that energy. I think this is a better version of Dracula, frankly. It's shorter, it's more compact, it's got punchier pacing, and I absolutely love it. It's one of my all-time favourite classics, and I recommend it every chance I get. So given that the title is The Beetle, I felt like I was justified sneaking it into this insects books recommendations. I know it's a little bit of a reach, but it's worth a read, so check it out. So there you have it. Those are some insect book recommendations that I have for you, both fiction and non-fiction. I definitely want to read more in this area, so if you have any recommendations, non-fiction books in particular, do let me know in the comments down below, because I do think insects get overlooked frequently when we're talking about the animal kingdom in general, but they actually make up a ridiculously large percentage of like the animal population on our planet. There are more beetle species than basically anything else out there. I do want to do a little shout out, if you're interested in this kind of area, to an Ologies episode. This is a podcast that I like to listen to, and they have an amazing one on millipedes and centipedes. If you're looking for, again, a little bit more of that like insect knowledge, it's incredibly cool. The guy who is the guest on it is like so passionate, and we've now actually found a millipede that has 1,000 legs. Awesome, it's no longer a misnomer. So have a wonderful week. Should we try that again? Have a wonderful reading week, and I'll chat to you soon. Bye.